Okay, cool.
Give me a moment.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I will just open the meeting of the Community Development Committee for the 9th of March. Tuia ki runga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho. Ka rongo te o, ka rongo te po. Homie huie taikia. Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai ki tēnā hui, te iwi rangatane tēnā koutou. Te kunahiro papaoia tēnā koutou, ina mana, ina rea, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. So welcome everybody to this first online meeting of the Community Development Committee. The meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the City Council's YouTube channel. Councillors and appointed members to keep their cameras turned on and microphones muted unless addressing the meeting. For everyone else, just have your camera and microphone on when you're addressing the meeting. Members, can you please use the chat box if you would like to propose an amendment? For questions and comments, we'll use the hand up function. Recommendations to the meeting will be displayed on the screen, and if we can't see that properly, then I'll read out the recommendation. Voting will be done by a raised hand, so you'll all need to have your cameras on so that I can see your hands are raised. And if your name isn't called before you speak, if you could please give your name before speaking. Thank you. So we will start with apologies. I think I have an apology from the Mayor. Are there any other apologies? Okay. Well, in that case, I will move that we receive the apologies.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Oh, you are here.
I'm not an apology, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought you had sent in an apology. I beg your pardon. Okay, well, if there are no apologies, we will just move on then. Thank you. So the next item is item number 2, additional items. I haven't received any. Are there any? Okay. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay. So that takes us to item 4, which is public comment. And we have a public comment from Ellen Dixon, who is the manager of the Housing Advice Centre, on item 8. So welcome, Ellen. And you have 3 minutes to talk to us, and then there may be some questions. So just start when you're ready.
Thanks so much, Lorna. Tēnā koutou, everybody, and thank you to the Community Development Committee for allowing the Housing Advice Centre to be here today to make comment. We are very excited by the concept of a night shelter and have, through my colleague Sally, been very involved in this process with Anu, who's been doing fantastic work from the community development team at PNCC. We uphold at the Housing Advice Centre that housing is a fundamental social good and human right, and that it is increasingly treated as an opportunity for investment, which is a good thing, but can sometimes take away from the full realisation of adequate housing as a component of the right to an adequate and standard of living. And given the fact that the Homelessness Action Plan 2020 and 2023 has come out, this makes this a really big import, and we're also seeing that on the ground. So we absolutely applaud looking through methods for structures that can break these cycles of homelessness that are going on. In regards to what happens on the ground that the Housing Advice Centre deals with on a daily basis, we are often seeing a number of publics who fall through the cracks when it comes to getting into emergency and transitional housing. This particularly includes youth and students, elderly, disabled, and particularly, as we've all seen recently in media, those with pets. Overcrowding has become a massive issue within emergency housing and is now pressurised by the concept of SIQ and the potential for motels to close down due to the fact if someone gets sick. Increasingly, we are hearing statements like, I am choosing to sleep rough tonight because I don't want to be in emergency housing because I find it unsafe, or because I don't have anywhere to go, either due to the fact that they may have a choice such as keeping a pet with them, or the potential in created homelessness, which means that we are seeing some individuals who, due to whatever reasons of their own, are unable to stay in one form of emergency accommodation, either due to disagreements with moteliers, or alternative situations, which means the MSD cannot house them recurringly in emergency housing. So the idea of a night shelter proves a little bit of a way of being able to bridge this healthily for us, particularly if there is, and we stress the importance here, cross-sector engagement for sustainability and holistic support with those wraparound services. We've seen some really good examples of that come up in conversation with our Housing Needs Monitoring Group, which has informed the report that has been given through to you. These monitoring of processes is to ensure these vulnerable persons who are often in these contexts, who typically do have a lot of additional issues such as trauma, low income, poverty, health and physical issues, and mental health issues. We like to say in the Housing Advice Centre, housing is the tip of the iceberg. There is a whole lot of other things that are underneath that iceberg, and they get revealed in the process of looking at housing. So as a consequence, we would stress the real importance of being able to have a night shelter that is able to have interagency engagement alongside PNCC and a number of other organisations who work in this space. This is really addressing to the fact for us, the idea of a night shelter is not just combating elements such as housing shortages and rising rent costs, but also we're seeing the increased cost of living in general has become an overarching issue in this area. We would also like to stress the importance of having this centred around kaupapa Māori organisations and having that place where people can feel that they can connect into their kind of their family, their whānau-oriented engagement. More often than not, we see situations and environments when it comes to housing, there's a lot of shame or whakama when it comes to a sense of self being responsible for not being able to be in a housing situation. So to have a night shelter that's able to give people dignity, bring them into a space where they feel welcome and not excluded, that includes that integration, is really, really key. And I think working with those kaupapa Māori organisations who already have a very strong foundation, te ao Māori and te kanga Māori processes. We've seen some amazing work that they've been doing through this pandemic environment, and would really like to stress that the communitarian action on homelessness is so central to combating it. More often than not, homelessness gets seen as an individual situation, and we want to ensure that it's kind of the ethos of a night shelter if we're going forward with this project. Would ensure that it's not focusing on the individual, even though it's the individual situation, but looking at the community process of bringing what we like to say a team around people, bringing us together as one. One of the things that our housing advisors often bring forward to us is how are we able to actually follow those people who have been in those homelessness situations. We often see people on the streets who then come and interact with us. So having an opportunity for a night shelter where we can have not monitoring in a negative sense, but in the ability to partner with people through the process of aiding them in housing, that would be greatly appreciated. And we very much appreciate all of the work that has already gone into this process. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Ellen. Thank you. Time is up in terms of the comment, but councillors, are there any questions? I'm seeing a couple of hands go up there. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ellen, for your comments. When you talk about night shelter, how big facility do you imagine? And are there any examples in the neighboring cities of the same kind of shelter?
Thank you for that question. It's an excellent question. In regards to our statistics, homelessness is a very high issue. We see more on homelessness than we do on the Residential Tenancies Act. In regards to other initiatives around in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I have loved talking with Anu about the structure of Wellington's engagement and the way that they have the different levels, because one of the things I know is very key is ensuring that these vulnerable publics sometimes don't always cross over in the same space just for their own safety, particularly for youth and students and vulnerable women, which is why we have some fantastic facilities available for them. I wouldn't be able to comment in all confidence on the factual statistical data on it, because unfortunately I don't have that information immediately in front of me. But in regards to how often we can't place people in emergency housing, for example, I had 3 to 4 people yesterday who I was struggling to place in emergency housing, and that's happening, that was on one day. And if we go across a week, we're probably struggling to find spaces for maybe 5 to 6 individuals for a multiplicity of reasons. So there is a genuine need in this space.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ellen, for your comment. What we have in front of us today is an item around a feasibility study, so it's sort of that first step, and just wanted to know from your perspective, sort of briefly, what the key focus and key questions you'd like to see answered through a feasibility study.
Thank you for that question. Feasibility for us, one of the things we see is lack of integration sometimes regarding the structural interagency engagement on the ground. It seems like we have some incredible groups who are doing amazing things, but often we're doubling up on work. If there are some central locations such as a night shelter where you're able to have that exchange of information between agencies in a systematic way, that's also then building capabilities from that, I think it would make significant influence in these areas, and also aid for integration between communication, say from MSD to those moteliers as well. So we're taking some of the pressure off of emergency housing in that context.
Thanks, Ellen.
Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ellen, for your report. Ellen, on a weekly basis, how many people are you getting that you would designate as homeless?
Thanks for that question, Susan. The majority of people we're dealing with are homeless in accordance with this definition within New Zealand, which also includes emergency and transitional housing. So within one day, we would at least have maybe, and this is only in-person meetings, so this is not including phone calls, we could have anywhere between 4 or 5. When we've got 2 people on, unfortunately, we've only got 1 on at the moment because one's out to COVID. But when it comes to phone calls, we're actually getting inter-regional phone calls as well. So within one day, we could have had maybe interactions with at least 10 people who would be classed as either in homelessness or about to be in immediate homelessness.
So these are people that there's no emergency housing for, and MSD cannot find them a place.
In regards to lack of placement, that's slightly less. So MSD do their absolute darndest, and so do we, to get them into housing, which often takes a lot of advocacy. In that case, I would say within a week we may have 2 to 3, but that's after we've done massive amounts of advocacy in order to get them through. And a lot of inter-agency work in order to work that through. But even yesterday, I had 2 young people who I have to say, unfortunately, there's no place to put you. They're in their early 20s. They need some type of support. They've been living in their car for months upon months. They can't find anywhere to go, unfortunately. As a consequence, we have to turn them away because they wanted to take a support dog with them because of mental health awareness. And these are types of contexts where, because of the pressure that's on the moteliers in this environment, because of the decisions they've had to make, MSD and we cannot push it any further. So where are we supposed to place them? Are we supposed to leave them in their cars?
Okay, yeah, no, and another question, if I may, Madam Chair. Who do you see as the key stakeholders in this, as well as the City Council?
In the concept of the night shelter itself?
Yes. No, just in as far as the night shelter goes.
MSD have been doing a massive amount of work in this. HUD obviously as well. Kāinga Ora have been doing a massive amount of work in this. And we work intersectionally with the Housing Needs Monitoring Group quite a bit. So we get crossovers with, say, Salvation Army. We work with a number of others, such as Tuatahi. There are a number of groups. It goes back to the point which I'm saying, none of them has been entirely centralised into the way we work between each other.
I'm thinking more of funding.
Okay.
Yeah,
of funding, I'm probably not the best one to comment, being a not-for-profit organisation myself.
No, that's all right, fair enough. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got quite a few questions, if it's okay. Firstly,
we'll start and we'll see how we go.
Right. Firstly, when you say a night shelter, that can mean several things. What do you actually mean by a night shelter?
That's a good question. Within the concept of what we've talked about with Anu, our awareness of a night shelter was the ability to have immediate access, hopefully, to some form of accommodation that is safe and warm within a period of a couple of days, as opposed to emergency housing, which is maybe maximum 7 days with the potential of full renewal.
Okay, so talking 2 nights possibly at the most. Okay, so you say accommodation. So is that a bed and maybe access to a kitchen and toiletries, toilets, etc. Just the real basics. Okay, right. Now we need onto it. Now, you're talking about both males and females, and children. You can't possibly be thinking of putting them together.
That is a very good point.
So there's two night shelters going to be needed.
And this will be something that I would just encourage the amount of research that can go into it to know the structures that are already being employed around the country to find that best practice is absolutely essential. But when it comes to those vulnerable groups, they have very specific needs, and those needs are not being met currently in many cases. When it comes to students and youth, I don't typically want to put them into emergency housing just because of the level of issues that can then go on there because of their own level of vulnerability. So yeah, we do need to have something for that. I've been in discussion with a multiplicity of youth and student-based organisations, and currently we don't have anything that fits that space. And it's similar for other areas. So we do have vulnerable women who do have some other access places to go, thankfully, in the city, which is fantastic. But when we've got elements such as those who are slightly older or those who are disabled, it does need to be thought of how many groups are we dealing with, what is the level of demand, and what would that look like for a space. So I very much support what you say, but yeah, would point back to the research in order to indicate that.
Yeah, just by listening to you so far, we need one for women, one for men, one for youth, and one for people, older people and disabled. So we're getting quite a few. The next one, question
Finlay,
I ask you.
Councillor Finlay.
Yes.
Councillor Finlay, just be aware that Ellen has come to make comment on the feasibility study. It's not her proposal.
We're just getting information from her. Okay.
Yeah.
Ellen, how many people would you say that are actually living on the street? Not those who are couch serving or staying at friends' houses, living in cars and sleeping on the street. How many would your gut feeling be in Palmerston North?
Again, we do not typically take all the statistical data for that because our focus is on accessibility for the individual. MSD would be the ones to point you towards actual statistical data on that. We get quite a few of them who have been living in their cars or in some type of makeshift form of engagement. So it wouldn't be unusual for us to see about 4 or 5 people a week who've been living in their cars, as opposed to those who are about to go into emergency housing.
Okay. And you're talking 2 nights maximum at the shelter?
That is something that I'd be very happy to see, whether or not it was possible with potential for renewal for those who end up not being able to find some form of emergency housing, just to take the pressure off of it. But obviously, again, going by the research would be the best option, and in testing and trialling it to see whether or not it would work if it's then implemented.
So you feel that the organisations that we have out there already in the non-profit are not meeting the need?
We can't. We cannot meet the need. It's absolutely insane, the level of demand. We are struggling to place people in emergency and transitional housing because there is not anywhere to place them.
And that includes Legacy and North Lodge?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That'll be it for now.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ellen, for all of your hard work in this area. I just wanted to ask, from your experience, understanding the full complexities of all of the different people who walk through your door, how long are you seeing people end up being homeless for at the moment?
Yes, that is an interesting one, because often what we see is systemic homelessness. So the very cyclical elements, and part of that we think is issues to do with education around tenancy as well. So for some people, we've managed to get them out of homelessness relatively quickly, in the matter of maybe a couple of weeks, but a lot of them will be in and out of homelessness for months. And that systemic homelessness is what we see quite regularly. And I think there are a multiplicity of issues playing into this. Some of it is, again, that lack of integration between support services to be able to be aware when a person kind of falls off the radar within some of those elements. But also the fact that just because of the level of pressure on emergency and transitional housing, it's quite easy for people to fall off the radar through the process of being in the process of trying to go through into permanent housing and social housing. And obviously the level of demand for social housing is dragging that out as well. So yeah, a couple of months would be quite regular. Some cases we've got even more systemic than that, maybe over a year.
And I guess just on that as well, I'm not sure if you would have this info, but I'll ask. Have you been seeing that has been increasing over time, or has that been, you know, once you're homeless, you're kind of homeless, and then, you know, you get fixed and it's all sorted? I'm just pitching that to you. Has there been an increase in the length of time people end up being homeless for?
Yeah, I can immediately talk to that one, even though I don't have the stats in front of me, because from the impressions and the trends we've seen in the office itself, yes. And that's been partly due to pandemic, massive amounts of people moving out of Auckland and going to the regions and suddenly thinking, if I'm in a region, I'll be fine, I'll get emergency housing because there's not as many people in the regions. Well, everyone's having the same impression at the same time. Another issue for that is vaccination passports have made it complicated for some people to be able to attend regular viewings for private housing, which means it's extended out the period that they're in that. And homelessness, but then we've also seen a little bit of a trend where, with the cost of living being so high, a lot of people are coming out of having been in permanent housing and suddenly being aware that they no longer have the financial support to be able to sustain permanent private rentals. So it's becoming systemic, partly because of the pressure on the market in that context, but also over the time that I've been in the office, and I've only been here for a period, it's ramped up even over the months that I've been in here with the amount of emergency cases that we're getting. And now the majority of our cases are emergency, as opposed to previously, I think even a year ago, we were largely working with tenancy issues. So that gives a bit of an indication as to what type of shift has been there.
Wonderful, thank you.
All good.
Thank you, Ellen. That seems to be the end of the question. So thank you very much for taking the time to come and make a comment and making yourself available to answer questions. Members, we'll now move the public comment be received. I'm happy to move it, and Councillor Bowen will second that. I would suggest if there are comments about this issue that we could save them until we deal with the item that's been commented on in item 8, just to save a bit of time. But if there is anyone that wants to comment now, please just let me know. Okay, so the resolution is that public comment be received for information, and we will vote now by show of hands, please. All those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So that brings us on to the first of our two presentations, which is a presentation on sheltered accommodation by Frank Bolton. So, Frank, you will have 10 minutes to talk to us if you wish. You don't have to take up all of that time. And after that, we'll open for questions. So, ready when you are. You will just need to unmute yourself, though.
Is that better?
Yes, that's
Yes.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, if any of you have read the document that goes with my presentation, you'll know pretty much what this is about. In our street, we've had terrible trouble going on for years with late night noise and hooliganism. By late night noise, I mean being kept up all night, 3, 4, 5, 6 nights a week. And, you know, none of us down that street are well. We can't cope with it. And I don't think that a fully healthy person would be able to cope with such sleep deprivation. Now, by and large, most of the problems seem to be tidied up. And the idea of my presentation is to make sure that we have plans and procedures in place to make sure that it stays tidied up, and that if it happens again, it can be dealt with a lot more quickly than the 6.5 years that it's taken the first time round, and that if any other residents in other parts of the city have similar problems, then the council has plans and procedures in place to be able to help them. Now, the council and MASH have actually done a lot to help out with this, as have the police, noise control, and our MP, Tangi Utakere. And the situation is now much better. It's the sort of state of affairs where we can live with it. It's often been difficult for us to see what the council is doing because of issues of confidentiality. But the council has done a lot, including over the past 2 weeks, installed some fencing so that cars can't get round to the grass area at the back of our places, the side away from the road, which is where our sleeping and living space is, so that we don't get disturbed by that anymore. And a lot of other things have been done to help. Since the beginning of December, there's been very little late night noise. 1 or 2 parties which have been within acceptable limits considering the season. We've had one really awful incident where the police were called to it and an arrest was made, but that seems to be unrelated. The only related incident seems to be the noise that we had last night, all night. Now, this is very much about developing better communities. We had a street, and now that most of our problems are sorted out, we have a community. We have better health, we sleep better, the residents interact with each other, or we help each other. We are less dependent on the city council, the police, noise control, the health service, etc. So a lot of people have won out, have really benefited from having our problems sorted out. One thing that we think would be really nice would be to have a go-to person to whom we can bring any further problems, bearing in mind that part of the way we want to handle this is to minimise trouble for the council, the police and the health service. We've put together a number of ideas which we think might be helpful. And the one that I want to speak to is having more of a split between MASH and the council, because what we find is that if a council tenant wants to make a complaint about a MASH tenant, they can't, and they can't go to a tenancy tribunal, and the converse is true. A MASH tenant can't make a complaint about a council tenant. And so that leaves us with some strange situations where I can complain about the guy in number 3, but not the guy in number 2, and my next door neighbour on the other side can complain about the guy in number 2, but not the guy in number 3. We all want to be under the same rules. And really, the only thing that would need to be tweaked is that the MASH tenants would, over a period of time, as I perceive it, be moved over to being council tenants, but their units would still be under a certain amount of control by MASH, like when the resident of that unit moves out, MASH is the one who will move a new tenant in there. But these are simply recommendations, and we believe that there will be a lot of benefits from this. It would make it far easier for Palmerston North City Council to resolve problems in complexes like ours, so it would save time, money and other resources. These measures would increase the job satisfaction of PNCC officers by making the resolution of many problems easier and faster, and the measures would reduce the overuse of other resources such as the police and the health service, because the problems that we have had have cost the police and particularly the health service an arm and a leg. And so we've got to the point where things are reasonably tidied up, but we would like some measures put in place so that sheltered accommodation is truly sheltered and we don't have to suffer more problems in life than the average person does. We want some measures put in place to ensure that the problems stay resolved, and if they're going to repeat, so that they can be solved faster and at less expense to the council, the police and the health service a second time round. We would like to see those benefits eventually extended to residents in other parts of Palmerston North. And I think that's about it.
Oh, well, that's perfect timing, Frank. Thank you, because we've just come to the end of the 10 minutes. So thank you very much for that. And members do have your notes as well that you supplied. So I've just got a question, and then we'll open to questions from other councillors. So you've referred to yourself and your neighbours struggling with issues. How many people have been affected by this, would you say? You're on mute again, sorry. You'll need to unmute yourself.
There we are.
Yeah.
I would say all of the tenants in blocks 1 and 2, and what I have discovered recently is that people as far away as block number 3 have been affected as well. So that's at least 10 people on our streets. Well, I've left the people on Aberdeen streets to look after themselves, because the problems we've had on Person Place have been quite enough to try to deal with.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Finlay, you had a question?
Very similar to what Councillor Johnson had, Frank. Of the residents in your area, you would say what percentage of them were actually in fear at one stage?
Frank, you're on mute again. You need to unmute yourself.
I would say a little over 50%.
Okay. And the tenants that were causing the problem, were they mesh tenants or were they council tenants?
Both.
They were both?
Yes.
So in your opinion, were they vetted properly before they were put into residence?
I really think that they've been vetted as well as one could have expected, but the problems have developed after they were put into their units, with the exception of my ex-neighbour Quentin in flat 3 next to me, and MASH should really have known what sort of problems we would have with him.
Okay. One last question.
I think it might be better just to not mention any particular tenants by name, if we could avoid that. Thank you.
Yeah.
One last question, Frank. You've identified the problem and you needed someone to go to. What sort of system would you like put in place where the residents could come and talk to somebody, where it would be confidential and there'd be no comeback?
I would like it to be somebody who doesn't feel beholden to either the council or to MASH, somebody independent of that. And basically somebody just to report how things are going, so that we know that somebody, hopefully in the council, is aware if the situation is starting to deteriorate again, and that would feed into being able to come up with some strategies for what do we do about problems like this. It's not an easy problem to solve. I mean, it's taken 6.5 years with the council MASH, the police, noise control, 2 MPs and various other agencies involved. It's taken an awful lot of person power to get the situation to improve as far as it has, and we don't want to lose that.
Okay, thank you for that answer. We've got Councillor Dingwall next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Frank, for coming and talking to us today. I actually live very, very close to you, and I was just wondering, the problems that you're experiencing, is it just in that person, place kind of area, or does it? Do you see any issues happening around that alleyway in between person, place, and Montrose, or any issues with the park just on that corner there, the Clausen Park, or is it just specifically that person, place area? Sorry, you're on mute again.
We haven't experienced as many problems as we thought with the alleyway, because usually that's young kids and they're on their way home. I'm not aware of any problems with the playground on Clausen Street. So it's our street, and sometimes the section of Aberdeen Street just to the back of us. And that really seems to be about it. You know, we get noise from other places, but, you know, one-off occasions, something that I think you just have to let go. It's when it's nearly every night and you can't keep yourself well enough to do voluntary or paid work because of it. That's the sort of thing that we want to be prevented.
Cool. Thank you for those answers. That's been very helpful.
Thank you, Renee.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Just wondering if these questions, these concerns had been raised with our housing officer with the City Council.
Which housing officer?
Chris, have we got a housing officer?
I think Chris Dyberg, the Chief Customer Officer, is going to just make a quick comment, and I think we've got Kerry Lee Probert also on the call who might be able to make a comment. But I was going to just let the councillor questions go first. So did you want them to answer that now, Councillor Harpeter?
No. Well, I just wondered, you've raised a lot of concerns, and I just wondered if they had been raised with the council housing or anybody in council.
Well, we've raised these concerns with housing officers.
In council?
In the council, yes.
Okay. In no satisfaction?
Not really, no.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay. Chris, I don't know if you wanted to make a comment now, or Kerry Lee if she's on the call.
Thanks, Madam Chair. First of all, Frank, just like to say thanks very much for taking the time and coming to talk to us and raising your concerns. It's very much appreciated. Look, I won't say too much. I'll let Kerry Lee, she may be able to comment about a couple of the specifics. Probably the only thing I was sort of surprised by, Frank, was the your comment about not being able to go to the tenancy tribunal. My understanding is that everyone has the right to go to the tenancy tribunal, and whether you're a tenant of Mash Trust or Palmerston North City Council, you know, that is still an option that you have. And I'm not saying that all issues should be left to that avenue, but I would hope that people appreciate that if they do have, you know, they've always got that step to take if they're not happy with the, how their landlord is dealing with issues that are raised. But look, yeah, I'll let Kerry Lee maybe make just a comment or two, but I'm certainly happy, Frank, offline to organise a time to maybe talk a little bit further, you know, with some of the housing officers and myself to understand in more detail the concerns that you have and some of the options that you've put forward. Kerry Lee?
Yes, just to also confirm that all the MASH tenants do have in place residential tenancy agreements with MASH, and so in the same way that our own tenants and tenants throughout the city have all the entitlements afforded to them by the Residential Tenancy Act. I'd also just mention, put people's minds at ease that there is no rule in place that prevents tenants from making complaints about other tenants, regardless of whether they're MASH tenants or not, and that the two tenancy officers have responded to all complaints that have been raised with them over time in a timely manner. And I noted from Frank's written submission, he talked about gang activity and other activity, antisocial behaviour at Pearson Place specifically, as I read it. And at this, we've got no knowledge of any recent gang activity or current activity, and certainly any antisocial behaviour that's coming to our attention is being dealt with through the appropriate channels. So.
Thank you, Kerry Lee, and thank you, Chris, for your comments and your offer to look into some of Frank's suggestions. We've just got a question from Councillor Bates. Sorry, Councillor Beatty, did you want to?
Yes, thank you. And the question is probably through you to Kerry Lee, Madam Chair, if you'll allow it. I just noted in the written, or actually I will ask Frank. Around the new tenants being given information to contact, I was aware that there's an 0800 number that you can contact for maintenance and any issues. Is that still available to you?
Yes, I believe it is still available, but you see, the tenants on our streets, none of us are completely well. We're all impaired by either old age, physical illness, mental illness, disability, or a combination of factors. And some of them really just don't understand that they can call the council about certain issues.
Okay.
That has probably reduced the number of complaints that have been made about this, that people not realising that they can do something. I'm talking about having a nice big fridge magnet that you can say, there's all the numbers you need if you have any trouble with the council.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Frank. You've answered that question.
So thank you very much, Frank, for taking the time to prepare your presentation and coming in and talking to us about it, and for highlighting some areas that you think we could do a bit better for our tenants. And I'm sure that staff will take those on board. So thank
May
you
I
for your
answer
time.
just one question that Chris and Kerry brought up? I actually tried to take a council tenant to a tenancy tribunal with the help of Manawatu Tenants Union, and we found that you can't even fill the form in. The form addresses specifically your landlord, not somebody else's landlord, and it addresses co-tenants.
Okay, so perhaps we've had the offer from Chris Darbo to look into this a bit further with the housing officers. So perhaps you could discuss that with them offline, if that's okay.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
All right, thank you, Frank.
Okay, can I go now?
Yes, you can. Yeah, thank you. Members, we'll now just move to receive the presentation for information. So I'll move that and Councillor Bone will second it. Is there any comment? Councillor Finlay.
I'd just like to thank Frank for coming. I think it took a lot of bravery on his behalf, and I've known Frank for a while, and he's done very well. But this is a problem that has been in our social housing for many years. I have known of many cases where people have been ignored until I actually get them to drop my name. There needs to be somewhere, somehow, an advocacy service for our residents when dealing with staff. A lot of our residents don't like or are afraid of going to authority figures of any sort. If there was somebody else that they could talk to as an advocate, I think it would be an incredible step forward. Thank you.
Councillor Finlay. So with that, we will vote to receive the presentation. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. So that takes us on to item 6, which is a presentation from the Manawatu Hindu Society. And presenting, we have Joe Singh, who is the president, and Bipan Bansal, who is an executive member. So Joe and Bipan, you've seen how to do it now. You've got your 10 minutes. And I understand that you've got a presentation, so you'd like to do a screen share with us. So feel free to do that. And over to you.
And, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Joe Singh. I live here in Palmerston North locally, and I'm a business owner here, and I'm a current president for this Manawatu Society. Thank you to Madam Chair and our Mayor Grant Smith and all the councillors for this opportunity to speak. On behalf of this Manawatu Hindu Society, I would like to, we got our executive member, Bipan Bansal here. He would be presenting this slideshow and running it with you guys, and then we will be very happy to answer any questions that any of the councillors or anyone has. So over to you, Bipan.
Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my privilege to be here. I'm Bipan. Look, I don't live in Palmerston North anymore, but we lived in Palmy for 15 years. Probably that's been the best place for my family, my kids. Now the kids have grown up, so we have moved to the Big Apple in Auckland, and I'm stuck here with COVID. And why are we here? Look, we, the Manawatu Hindu Society, would like to build a Hindu community center in Manawatu, particularly in Palmerston North, and we are seeking your support for that. So what does it mean? I'll just move the next slide. The Hindu Community Center will help us promote and celebrate different aspects of Hindu culture, religion, and philosophy. And you will be aware that's one of the oldest culture. And how will we do that? By providing a communal area for people of all ages to come, meet, learn, and enjoy. And Hindu temple is a subset of that. What is the need? We have a large Hindu community in the region. According to 2018 census, there were 2,250 people who were affiliated with Hindu religion, but in reality, it is likely to be many more because not everybody fills the census. But also over the last few years, you would have seen a lot more new immigrants coming in and settling in Pami and calling it a home. Unfortunately, we don't have a communal space which can fulfill the needs, the specific needs of the Hindu community. Those needs are around social, culture, spiritual, and also some educational needs. And when we are talking about the needs, whether it is during the time of birth, at the time of marriage, or even if we look into elderly parents when they pass away doing the last rites, there are specific ways to do it. And global pandemic has made it even difficult, especially because the closest place is in Wellington. And we have to go there, do certain ceremonies. And even under normal circumstances, that is very, very difficult. So what we want to do is, by having this Hindu Community Center, we would like to cater to the needs of the local community, but the extended community as well. When we talk a community, we are talking children, youth, elderly, new migrants, and many, many refugees. We believe it will be a big draw card for the community. Means if I can delve you into like the way Eastern culture or Hindu culture has been, we are talking about not just Indians here, but we are talking from Asia, we are talking people from Africa, from Europe, and many other countries all around the globe who call Pami the home, but they affiliate with Hindu religion. So what we are trying to do is by providing that communal space, we would like to foster healthy and positive relationship between different age groups and also between Hindu community and the extended community. So we have been doing a lot of work in this area. Like some of you may be aware in the council, a lot of attempts have been made over the last 15 years to build a Hindu Community Center. We have tried, but we have failed for a number of reasons. Maybe we were ahead of our time. Maybe the community needs were not very well specified, but where we are up to that stage, 2.5, almost 3 years ago, we built Manavatu Hindu Society with a specific purpose. We need to do something for our community. We got lots of festivals, a lot of cultural things happening. Our kids do miss out on some aspects of their own culture. Of course, we are all here. We live and work like Kiwis, but being connected to our own roots is also equally important for us. And so for us, we have been looking into a number of options. The ideal option will be to purchase land and build a purpose-built facility. We have done some numbers. We are talking $1.5 million plus. We are a new organization, a small organization. We don't have that capability. So we have ruled that out, at least for the near future. Other option is to buy an existing house on a land. That will be cheaper. We can go into it straight away, but still very, very expensive. So the third option for us is to lease a commercial building. That will be less cost to start with, but practically it is going to be very, very difficult for us to find a suitable long-term permanent lease and also to adapt it to our needs. And the last option where we think that we can get some help from you, where you could help us one way or another, either through land or through land and building, you could give us a lease. Of course, it won't be the ideal situation because it wouldn't fulfill the needs. But based on where we are and what the resources we have and the practical reality we have in front of us, that would be the best option ahead of us. And Joe, I'll ask you, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I think that you have explained it really well. These are the only 3 or 4 options that we have, and particularly the 4th one, which is the leasing the land and the building from the council. Madam Chair, that's the we've been looking into, and I've spoken to our Mayor Grant Smith last year, and I think that's where we are at the moment here. So I hope that we can certainly,
And we have sent a business case or our business plan to you. I'm assuming everybody had a chance to look at it, and we will send this presentation after this meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Bipin.
Thank you, Bipin. And Joe, is there something more you wanted to say, or shall we move to questions?
We have presented this, and we have shared this business plan that we have prepared previously. I believe that's been shared with all the council members, but if they haven't received a copy of it, we will be very happy to share a copy of those things to all of them.
Yes,
we are happy
we
to take
do have
questions.
a copy.
That's fine.
Yep. We have a copy of the information that you provided. Thank you, and a copy of the slides as well. So all in the agenda. So that's okay. Thank you. So we'll move to questions. First, we've got Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Bipin and Jatinder. Good to have you both. In your option analysis, obviously you are asking for going for the 4th option. If, for example, we say, yes, this is the better option and we are ready to help, have you thought about the area or which part of the town do you think it can be possible?
I think that it's a very good question, Councillor. But the majority of our functions, they all happen in the evenings. So traveling out of town would be very, very difficult for the ladies and children's. So it would be ideal that, like, if we can get it in somewhere in the central city, would be ideal. But we are happy to consider options like,
And in terms of the size, sorry.
Bipin, just before you carry on, would you be able to share your screen? Because we could be able to see you when you're talking. We can just see the screen at the moment. Thank you.
Here you go. No, in terms of, Councillor did ask the question, what sort of size are we looking at? In terms of the building, we will be looking at least 200 square meter. And in terms of the land size, something which is congenial with the surroundings in terms of the car parking. Like if we have people and there is a function, we don't want to cause trouble for the neighbors. So there should be some parking either on the street. So are we talking about commercial area or something a little bit out of, say, extremely packed area will be handy?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Bipin and Joe. I've just got one question, just in terms of, and hopefully I haven't missed it in the documents, but can you just explain the relationship between the Manawatu Hindu Society and also the relationship with Central District Indian Association? Is there an association there, and are there any opportunities, I guess, around raising funds? I guess that's what I need to know. Thanks.
This is thank you for this question, Councillor Pratt. Central District Indian Association is also, they are also representing Indians, and they are very well aware of what we are trying to do this, and they are also very supportive of this idea. So there is no difference between what we are trying to do or what they are trying to do. There is no difference of opinion on those things here. They are aware of that the community does need this type of facility.
Yeah, and I will add to that, Councillor Hancock. CDI is Indians, which is umbrella organization, which include Hindu, Muslims, Christians. Here we are talking about Hindus, not necessarily from India, but they could be from, let's say, Bangladesh, from many countries in Europe, many countries in Africa, or other Eastern countries. So we are looking at under the umbrella of Hinduism, which is like global. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Look, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Joe and Bipin. Great to get your presentation. And yeah, there's been a few discussions in the background, and it's a bit of a difficult one, to be really honest. Look, a couple of questions, Madam Chair. Joe, are there more than one Hindu group in town, or are you representative or speak for all those 2,200 or possibly even 2,500 Hindus in the city?
You're right. It's a good question, Grant. And there are many different groups maybe in existence. We have got support letters from some of them, and they all are very well aware of this need, and they all are supportive of this. They may have approached the city council for on different occasions. But this is just, as Bipin had explained, that we are trying to build this community center, which will serve the need for all of them. Hinduism is just one, so there is no different factions to this. I don't see there is any. This will certainly cater to the needs of all of them. It's not one that we needed for Fiji Indians, and there is one that we needed for Indian Indians. It's not like that. It's just, I think it will serve the need of all of them.
And I'll just add to that, Mayor Smith, it will be like the question you said, are there different Hindu groups? Probably I'll put it in a slightly different way. There may be many organizations, cultural, social, which are serving different needs of the community. And what we are trying to at least represent through MHS is a united front and catering to the needs of the extended community.
Okay, just on that, and again, probably leading to where Councillor Hancock was going, are there, because this is quite a big thing for council to even consider, to be honest, but are there other things always go well in joint ventures when you're trying to climb a mountain, and I think you are certainly trying to do that. Are there any other JVs that could be, or other groups that you could JV with?
I would say there is always a possibility. I mean, we have been exploring those opportunities, but the challenge is always the initial start. And what we were hoping to do, like even if it's, like it's always the capital. We have raised few funds, but certainly when you talk of the size of the building and the area, we start talking about $1 million+, which is very, very difficult for a voluntary organization like ours. So yes, definitely we can continue to explore those options, but in reality, that thing could take years and possibly decades, especially considering the size of the city and the number of people there. And what we were hoping to do is if council could support us, even if it could lease a building for us for a few years, so we can establish a base that will then start returning income. And that could eventually help us self-sustain this organization, and then we can look into building a purposeful facility.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hupter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Joe and Bipin. Just a quick question from me. It's around the lines of whether or not there is any other models that this has been based on in other cities, like whether, since you've come from Auckland, Bipin, whether this has been based on anything that's been done in Auckland.
I think our answer will be yes and no, Councillor Hupter. One is, look, sometimes depending on the size of the city, they can get support from international large organizations, just simply because in Auckland, you will say it will be close to 50 to 70,000 Hindus there or Indians there. Whereas in a place like Rotorua, I'm aware of one international Hindu organization funded the building of a temple, but they have a specific spot that they want only one or two in one country. So we have explored all those options and we are now stuck in a way. That's where we are coming in to seek some advice, guidance and support.
Okay. And another question, could this be a shared location? It's just in the interim, could you share this location with another group? So you have it sort of like at night and another group have it during the day, just a suggestion going forward.
Definitely. Definitely, I would say yes, because Joe, you may want to add to that. For us, it will be what's the best value for the given resources. And if it fulfills the needs of many organizations, it should be welcomed.
Thank you.
Just to extend on those questions that Councillor Hapita and Mayor Grant Smith was asking, I think we had a discussion in the past as well where Grant mentioned that about the participation from the community, 1/3 participation from the community, 1/3 participation from the council, and things like that. I think we are still of the opinion that, Grant, like if we get some kind of support from the council, then the community would be able to get together and be rally around, and we will be able to have a joint venture or joint partnership with the council, and can look into promoting that part as well. Yeah. As well as sharing it with other communities and other groups. Like, we are open to all those things, Councillor Hapita. So that's absolutely possible. Yeah.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for bringing this to our attention. I was just trying to hone in a bit about, I guess, the need and your membership base. You said that 2,250 people have Hindu association within the Manawatu Wanganui region. That's quite a large geographical area that covers at least 3 local government places. I was just wondering, do you know how many of those people are actually located in Palmerston North?
Yes, at least 80% of those. And yes, you are definitely right, the area is big. I think, to be realistic, we can't think of multiple community centers, one here, one in Masterton. We are trying to start with one. And so we are looking into, like, at the moment, if we have to fulfill our needs, either we go to Wellington or Hamilton or Auckland. So in that sense, that area is not big for us.
And I guess with that 80% then that are based in Palmerston North, do you communicate with them regularly? Have you sent out surveys or anything just to try and gauge what their specific needs are in terms of what you're looking at, or try and get support from them?
Councillor Dingwall, like we have been hosting hosting different functions, and we have analyzed that people have been coming when we have checked their addresses, for COVID tracking things, and they've been coming from far-flung areas like Masterton, and from Wanganui. We have representation from Wanganui, and there's no place of get together or communal or place for worship. There's nowhere that they can do those things. And lately, when parents of our families who are coming and joining, there is no place for them to. They don't converse so well in English, and they wish to communicate, and it's mental health is a big issue for elderly parents who are just confined to their homes only. So this particular place will certainly cater to a large area. People living in Wanganui, people living in Masterton or in Horowhenua Greater. It will cater to all those things here.
Thank you. And I guess my last question on that then is, what are you doing at the moment together? Are you currently using council's existing community centres to sort of gather, or?
Yes, we had been hosting in the past. Like, if we could, due to COVID, we couldn't, like this Festival of Lights. The Diwali festival last year was cancelled. It was all planned, and were supposed to have it in the square. But all those festivals been cancelled. But as soon as we return to normalcy, we should be able to host those events. And all our newsletters and communication been well received by different groups and different people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just one thing I'll add to that, Councillor Dingwall. When you're saying in terms of needs, yes, we've been close to the community and we've been checking the pulse. And just give you one thing as an experience, we believe having a Hindu community center, based on how we think as a Eastern culture to some level. Whenever I've been to other countries, you always look into the local pages. Is there any local community center I could go to and mix with local people? So it can be, may not be the main reason, but it can be a very big reason for people to consider shifting to Palmerston North. But that's certainly we believe, but that's how people think.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Beatty.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Bipin and Joe. The Bhutanese community have been advocating for a community centre for some time as well. So do you see that your proposal would meet their needs, and have you been communicating with them as well?
Yes, it's a good question, Susan, Councillor Beatty. There's the president of Bhutanese Society, Bal, and there is secretary, Pandit Ghanshyam Kafle, and Indra Dulal. They all been they are executive members of our society. So they've been very well communicating with us. They are part of they also follow Hinduism. So, like it will certainly cater to their needs as well, 100%.
Excellent. Thank you.
Just a couple of questions from me. I guess the first one is just, are you part of the interfaith community in Palmerston North, or do you have relationships with the other faith groups in Palmerston North?
Certainly, Councillor, Madam Chair, like we are part of the interfaith, society. They have given a letter of support to us, which you can see it on page number,
So they have endorsed our efforts.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's.
So on page number 18, you will see their letter of endorsements being given to us, and other groups. We are all part of like as a group. We have joined Manawatu Multicultural Society. I'm also a member of them personally as well. Yeah.
Okay, that's.
So they all are in support of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And have you engaged with any of our community development team about some of these ideas?
Like we met not last year, but the year before we did met. Mayor Grant Smith, and we've been introduced to that time. There was Joanna Ransom was one of the community managers, but it was Christmas time, and then after that we had COVID, and those circumstances changed. So we were not able to make much headway around that time. So but then we have started working on our business proposal, a couple of other things that we need to achieve. So we had more at length in discussions with different community leaders that we have, and so that's where it is at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Chris, I didn't know if you or someone from your team wanted to make a comment at all.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, happy just to take that on board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to jump in, albeit a bit late with a question. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Bipin. Just trying to understand a little bit what the vision is here. The presentation that you've given to us speaks of community center. It also speaks of a temple. In my mind, a community center is quite open towards the community and might have a lot of different groups use it over time, albeit with perhaps the Hindu community being sort of the lead tenant or the lead organization there. On the other end of that spectrum, I think of something like a temple as quite a sacred space, and one that is only entered into through specific members of a smaller community perhaps. So just trying to understand, if those were the two sort of ends of the spectrum, what the vision is for your group in terms of what you would like to see realized here in the city.
Maybe Councillor Barrett, I can answer that. First of all, if you allow me, if I'll say temple is open to everybody, there is no restriction to entry in any part of the world. And for us, temple will be only a subset where prayers are done. But community center is, community center, we are talking about a hall type thing where people come in, meet. So temple is for religious needs, whereas community center is for cultural, spiritual, educational, and learning needs. So we see those marry with each other quite nicely. And there are many models. The best model will be in Auckland, which is a Gandhi Center, has a temple on one side, but we are talking different order of magnitude here. So they are catering to every need of every single person. So definitely no restriction in that sense. And we will in fact encourage that if we can promote Hindu philosophy to other members of the community, because ultimately what Joe said, it is all about sharing and giving. And in that way, it is mental health, or is it in terms of imparting good values, good moral values? That's what we are looking at.
Great. Thank you both. That's helpful.
Just to add on to this, Councillor Barrett, we currently got some some teachers here in Palmerston who are from Fiji Indian people. They are teaching Hindi, our national language, to people, and there are people who are teaching Tamilian languages here, and they just don't have. They are going to different they are hiring different halls or schools, and they are conducting those things. So if we have a common place for all these things, all these languages, yoga classes, and they all can be catered and all can be delivered in one place, and people of different faith and different, they all are welcome to attend it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. That's very helpful, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just a question from me to you, Chris. Would we be able to assume that community development staff will follow up with Joe and Bipin, or do you need a recommendation?
No, I think, thank you. We can certainly follow up, and I think given that the project's underway to look at the overall approach to community facilities, it's quite timely to understand this. So yes, look, we'll take the action on board to make sure that someone follows up.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Joe and Bipin, for coming in presenting to us today. We appreciate you coming in and your patience in waiting until it was your turn as well. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Members, I'll just move that we receive the presentation for information. So I'll move that. Councillor Bowen will second that, and I'll open up if there's any comment. The Mayor first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I just want to acknowledge the Manawatu Hindu Society and especially Joe and Bipin, even though he's in Auckland now. You're welcome to come back, Bipin. And look, they have tried, and it is quite hard. I think we've got to be a little bit careful about setting a precedent, but I do think there is real value in having a community centre type option around this. It did go to offices, and look, it fell between the cracks with people leaving, coming and going, and we probably, with COVID, haven't given it the priority it probably deserved. But I do think there is an option there around a JV as well, and I'm unsure what buildings we've got because it's an operational thing. But it's something that perhaps the community team can have a look at the options, have a look at some of the other organisations in this space that may be in a partner mode, and to see whether we can do anything to help this much needed and rather large part of our community. Thank you.
Thank you for that. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to Joe and Bipin for making time to do this presentation with us. I guess I just want to highlight the value in community groups coming and using this opportunity to share their aspirations with us. there won't always be a, I guess, central role for council in addressing some of the needs, but first and foremost, it's actually just really important for us to understand, I guess, the needs and desires of our community. And typically we do hear quite detailed communications through things like our long-term plan and annual plan, but actually outside of those, and particularly through the community development meeting, it is a really good opportunity for us to know what else is going on. As the Manager of Customers said, we've got a community facilities review going on in the background, and that's another opportunity for us to actually look at where the gaps are and get a really clear picture of what the needs are in our community. So I think that this is great timing, first of all, but we've also heard lots of other community groups who have, lots of other groups in our community who have got specific cultural needs when it comes to finding space. We've had conversations about a multicultural centre of some sort. So I think that actually there's real value in us hearing this and maybe seeing even where we can just make some connections for other groups. And yeah, just want to encourage actually, you know, we can explore the role that council might have in certainly this project moving forward, but overall it's actually just really useful for us to know what the needs are and have a good oversight over the city. So thank you for making the time to speak to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So, I mean, just a short comment from me. I do very much understand the need for some cultural and spiritual support for the Hindu community in Palmerston North, and as was commented on, you know, a large part of that community is made up of the Bhutanese Hindu community. So I totally understand the need, and I think council can be a bit of a facilitator in this area. We do have to be a little bit careful around funding religious aims, but certainly our remit is around community connection, social cohesion, and so on. And so in that aspect, I think it's very much our business. And I'm hopeful that by you know, hearing some of the aims today, we can get staff re-engaging with you and see if there's a way forward, perhaps with other partners. I don't know if Ministry for Ethnic Communities would have a role in this, or there may be other partners. So thank you for taking the time today, and hopefully we can help you move this forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So with that, members, we will now vote. So I'll ask for a show of hands, all those in favour, please. Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, that motion to receive the presentation is carried. Thank you. So we will now move on to the confirmation of the minutes of the December meeting, 1st of December. I'm happy to move those, and Councillor Bowen will second. Are there any matters arising? No. Okay. Well, in that case, then we will move to accept the minutes, to confirm the minutes. Sorry. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Sorry, if I could just have the faces on so I can see the hands. Could you just put your hands up again if you're voting in favour of receiving the minutes? Thank you. Anyone against? And any abstentions? You're an abstention, Councillor Beattie? Well, yes? Yep, okay, we'll note that. Thank you, so that is carried. And that takes us on to item 8, which is the report on the options, costs and timeframes for a feasibility study for the night shelter. And that is presented to us by Stephanie Velvin. So Steph, are you available?
I am.
That's great, thank you. And just before Steph starts, I'd just like to congratulate Steph on her appointment as Community Development Manager. So very well done.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora koutou. So I'll just provide a few introductory comments for the report. In 2021, as part of 10-year plan deliberations, Council resolved that the Chief Executive investigate options for a night shelter and report back to the Community Development Committee in the 21-22 year with options, timeframes and costs of a feasibility study. In response to submissions from the community around the issues faced in terms of accessing emergency accommodation, Council determined that there was value in an early investigation report to provide data, further context and information around options, timeframes and costs of a feasibility study to determine what role Council might have in addressing these issues. This is that report. Our investigations for this report have largely been a desktop exercise, though we did get the chance to visit with the City Mission in Wellington to gain an understanding of their work, and we have had several conversations, as referred to by Alan earlier, with housing providers and social support services in the city to hear their views on the current situation locally. It became clear in our investigation of options that while homelessness is complex and exact data can be challenging to ascertain, it is evident that there are many people in our community experiencing severe housing deprivation, and as we've heard earlier, availability of accommodation is a significant issue. We've found that night shelters exist in all of the larger cities around the country, generally being run by for-purpose organisations with funding contributions from councils and others. Alongside this, we also found that an evidence-based best practice model is being rolled out in a number of cities to address homelessness, called Housing First. We then asked the question, why is Housing First not being implemented in Palmerston North already? And it was difficult to point to a definitive answer, though in conversations with providers and with the ministry, it looks likely that this is A, because previously we weren't deemed to have enough of a problem, which relates to that lack of clear data, and B, because providers are busy, doing a very good job providing their core services, and there is a gap in terms of capacity and resource to lead out a coordinated effort to plan and implement a collaborative Housing First model locally. Which leads us to the recommendation in this report that further work be enabled in the shape of a feasibility study to gather more information and explore in more detail how Council can support a coordinated response to the homelessness issues in the city. And we've detailed the proposed scope of the next phase of work in the report. While staff view that to proceed with this work is aligned with Council's aspirations for the community, it is noted that this would be significant and additional work to what has been planned and resourced for, hence the recommendation for consideration of option 1A with budget to enable appropriate resource to be engaged. Happy to take questions.
Thanks very much, Steph, that's great. Councillor Bowen, question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stephanie, for the very good report and congratulations on your appointment, promotion. Stephanie, I particularly appreciated your explanation of Housing First. That was really helpful. You've answered some questions in your comments then about why that's not happening in Palmerston North. So the questions I'm left with were really in your table B, under option 1A, additional budget provided to engage extra resource. You've said $100,000 based on estimates received. Can you tell me a bit more about the estimates received? Have we gone out to the market to look at a consultant who might do that work?
Yeah, we went out and we had, I guess, early scoping conversations based on what we thought that work might look like. And we received two local estimates.
And were they also able to give an indication of their ability or time frame to do that work?
Yes. The conversation was around them being able to start the work next financial year. That's what we were working off. We've had subsequent conversations about whether that could start earlier. One is a possibility and one is probably no. Though the one that could start earlier did note that it would be unlikely that that would be able to achieve in this financial year, so it would stretch into next year anyway. You're on mute.
That's 2 providers. If we were looking to go ahead with this piece of work, would you anticipate going out more widely to the market?
Yes, there would be a formal process that we would need to follow. Yeah, that was just early sort of investigative conversations. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Steph. That's very helpful. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steph. Look, a couple of things. You said all major cities in New Zealand have a night shelter or a city mission. So what, and comparable cities to us. So does that sort of come down to sort of past the Tauranga and the Dunedins? Like, you know, Napier's got one, Nelson's got one, Whangarei. Is that correct?
Find the correct part in the report. Apologies, more difficult on a screen. Yeah, so the larger cities have night shelters. So that is Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Tauranga, Hamilton, Dunedin. I guess the smaller cities that may be more comparable in size to us, it's a bit less clear. Some of them have something that is similar to a night shelter, but isn't exactly like it. There's obviously housing services that are filling some of those gaps in other cities of our size. The thing that is across all similar cities, I would say, is the housing first model.
Okay, so sorry, I missed a little bit of that as you spoke about that very, very quickly. So who runs Housing First? Is it a program? Sorry, I just need a little bit more info on that.
Yeah, it's led out nationally by the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development, HUD, right. As part of their homelessness strategy. And then they engage local providers or networks of local providers to deliver that in communities.
Okay, so my next question, that leads to my next question, and you are aware that there was a city mission mooted for the city some years ago by the churches, but just didn't quite get off the ground.
Yep, sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
So you were aware that there was a city mission type night shelter organisation that was mooted by the churches a number of years ago?
Yes, yeah, I understand there have been a number of things over the years that have been trialled and things that have, no longer exist for various reasons. Yeah, but this report was really based on the current situation and moving forward what the options are.
Okay, and just one final question, Madam Chair. So wouldn't it be appropriate that HUD shares in the cost of, I mean, there's obviously a real need there, but is it all the city's responsibility or should there not be other partners involved in this?
Absolutely, I think it's a cross-agency effort required to address homelessness. And I think that's one of the reasons why we need to do a further piece of work to figure out what our role is in that, and engaging with the people that are working in this space already, and then having a further conversation with the ministry about what options or opportunities are available for us as a community, okay, which includes funding, I think.
Yeah, I'm actually talking about the funding of the feasibility study, but that's fine. I'll leave it to comment. Thanks, Steph. Well done.
Thanks. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Steph. Have you had any conversation at all with Salvation Army? Because they did have a men's hostel and a women's hostel operating here in Palmerston North for many years. So did you discuss it at all with them?
So the conversations we had were with the partners or the collective in the housing needs monitoring group. and then a couple of further conversations through that as well with individuals. Yeah.
So you've talked to Legacy Housing?
Yes.
Okay. I would suggest you have a talk to the Salvation Army, because around the country they have probably done more about homelessness than anyone else, and they did have it running very, very effectively here in Palmerston North.
Sorry, is that a question, Councillor?
Yep. Will you talk to the Salvation Army?
Yeah, so the next phase of work would be much more in depth, and if we had that resource, we would be able to have wider conversations.
I think you'll find that they have a lot of information.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And congratulations, Stephanie. Well done. Stephanie, if we decided to go with this and wanted to move the budget forward, I know that we have some budget, well, perhaps spare this in the end of this financial year. What would we need to do, or how would we ask for budget? Would you need a recommendation?
Just before Steph answers that, Councillor, I do have an alternative recommendation to put up, which does suggest using money from the surplus, so that may answer your question.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I'll answer then.
Thank you. Sorry, Steph. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Steph, and congratulations on the new role. Hey, just for absolute clarity, just the difference in terms of time frame between 1A and 1B is 1A, if we put in 100K in the next annual budget, we could complete that work within 6 months, and the 1B is we would start 9 to 12 months away from today. Is that what we're saying?
Sorry, no, that so it would take that long, likely take that long to complete the work. That's what we estimate, rather than to start the work.
Great, thank you. Cheers.
So that appears to be end of questions. So thank you, Stephanie, for your report and answering the questions. Councillors, you'll see that the recommendation was suggested to be that the committee refer option 1A to the annual budget deliberations, and the advice we received last week was that it was really too late to do that because the cut-off date was last week, and so I have got an alternative recommendation which has been seconded by Councillor Bowen, which I'll get the administrator to put up, please. So this is that the Council direct the Chief Executive to proceed with option 1A in the 21-22 financial year, so that's the current year, with funding for the night shelter feasibility coming from the operational surplus, and report back to Community Development Committee in the first quarter of the 22-23 year. In the interest of fairness, I should say that Councillor Naylor also has an alternative recommendation, which is that the feasibility study be completed using internal resources. So should my recommendation fail, then we will move to that one. So it's just so that you know that that's available. So I'll just speak to this first. I think we will probably all agree that it's an important next step to go on to the feasibility study. The report that we asked for after the 10-year plan deliberations was intended to be a report that was able to be quickly produced without too much time and resource to give us an indication as to whether or not we needed to proceed with the feasibility. And I think the case has been very well made that a feasibility study is a very sensible next step. One of the issues that we have with this problem is one of urgency and timeliness. And so I would be very keen to move on with the feasibility study as soon as possible. rather than waiting until the next annual budget round, which is a year away since we've missed this one. And internal resources always sounds like an attractive option, doesn't it? You know, we're sort of getting something for nothing. But effectively what it will mean is that other work will be deprioritised, and I'm not keen to add to the significant stresses that our staff are working under at the moment in terms of capacity. So in terms of the feasibility study itself, I mean, we heard very clearly from Housing Advice this morning, and it's in the report, and I think we're probably all aware anecdotally that there is a need in the city. And the feasibility would look into some of the questions that elected members have raised around where would the funding come from, would council be a funder or a facilitator. I don't think we're really envisaging that this would be a council-run operation, but we are an organisation that can get things going and bring people together, and I think that there certainly would be a need for that. It's very well aligned to our strategic direction, and I think we're dealing with a sort of an urgent situation here in the community where the need for emergency housing is greater than ever. There isn't adequate capacity for everybody that needs to be housed in our community, and I think that this would be something that the community would welcome us playing a part in getting going, rather than being necessarily the one to do it all. So with that, I'll see if there are other people that wish to speak, and I wonder if I should just offer to the Councillor Bowen, since you're the seconder, did you want to speak next?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely happy to second this. I was happy to second it before the meeting, but even more convinced of the need to get on with this piece of work following what I found to be a very compelling public comment earlier in the meeting, just about the scale of the issue that we're starting to face in our community. A city mission does have the ring of a big city problem about it, but actually a city mission is something that's very much needed in our city as we respond to these issues. And I've noted with interest over the last few months that All Saints Church have gone ahead and registered a city mission as a charitable organisation working out of All Saints. They're positioning themselves very strongly to work for purpose in this area, and well, their expression of intent certainly says that they're willing to work with council in that regard. So there does seem to be movement across our community. This isn't something where I think council is leading the conversation. I think we're responding to our community or asking us to have the conversation. And a feasibility study is a sensible next step to see who will lead in that space and what council's role will be, as the chair just outlined. The reason I was particularly happy to second the motion that's been put forward by the chair is because it uses this year's surplus. We've come, for reasons entirely outside of our control, to the end of the year with millions of dollars in surplus, which we've rated our community for with a view to delivering community outcomes that have been unable to be delivered. And this is something that I think sits squarely within a community outcome. It's very strongly aligned with our strategic direction, and there's money there that we can bring. It's not even bring forward. We can just use it to do this, and that stops us having to put things into next year's budget or put in unbudgeted items when we haven't even agreed this year's budget yet. So we've still got a quarter of this year to go. There's time to get on and do this, and it sets us up well for an engagement with our community through an appropriate consultation process. So I'd encourage your support for this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Both you and Councillor Bowen have said it all. I just would like to say, could we put 100K in that? You haven't mentioned a figure in the motion it went quickly. So I didn't see a 100K figure in the recommendation, unless I missed it when it went off screen.
No, I think you're right. And I'm happy to put that in with the support of the seconder to specify the sum. Yep, I think that would be a sensible addition.
Thank you. I'll be happy then. And I'd just like to comment. I know one of the other, Councillor Finlay mentioned the Salvation Army, and they're an extremely good organisation, but they do run hostels, and this model is about night shelters, and it's about the housing first model. And having visited them in Auckland when I had the opportunity 18 months ago, this model is totally different to hostels, and it also covers all the multi-agencies, so it combines all the supported agencies in the region. So that's the reason why I support it. It's bringing all those people on board, and if the feasibility is done, it may mean that council is only involved very little if we can get funding through government, if we put pressure on. So very happy to support this in times of need with housing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think the Chief Customer Officer would just like to make a comment about finances. Is that correct, Chris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just in relation to this motion, I suppose just a couple of points of context. So, look, we can certainly do our best to get this work underway this financial year, given we're probably, by the time we get through, even a quick procurement process to finalise who the person would be, we're probably up against it in terms of getting a full piece of work done. So I suppose I just raise that, yes, there is surplus available. Yes, we could direct it into doing this. I am doubtful we'd probably get it all spent or completed this financial year. And as you will know, my finance colleagues are loath to carry over operational budgets like this into a next financial year. Having said that, I don't think there is anything necessarily wrong with sort of trying to get that work underway and use as much as we can to get that done by the surplus this year. If we did end up not being able to carry anything forward, or not, only say spending half of it and having another half to spend, then we can, and I have already spoken to Cameron about that, and he said, well, look, we just need to try and find the money next year to finish it off. So look, it's just raise it as a bit of a risk. It's not a reason not to go ahead with this, but that's obviously a bit of an issue. I also like just to clarify, I did hear from Steph on the side that Anu did actually speak with Salvation Army, so they had been consulted as part of that initial piece of work, and Steph just didn't have that to hand. So just like to update on that one. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. So I will go back to Councillor comment. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am immensely supportive of a feasibility study for, I guess, a night shelter, or even to investigate what's happening in the homelessness space. And I guess for me, it's really the urgency of it is quite intense. 20 years ago, I was a homeless person out on the streets, and I know from experience how difficult life is in that situation, and how difficult it is to access services in that space. When you're too busy worrying about, where you're going to sleep at night, and your safety, and how you're going to brush your teeth, you can't even begin to start doing things like trying to find a job because you need an address for that, or even getting access to funds from work and income because you need an address for that. So there's a lot of barriers that end up being immediately put in front of you once you end up homeless. And one of the things that's really concerning me is the trend that I've been seeing over the last decade here in Palmerston North, where, as described on page 61, there were 3 different kind of classes of homelessness. And what I've been seeing is the transitionally homeless, people who are who are normally able to maintain a tenancy or stable housing unsupportive, but have found themselves homeless due to major life events like redundancies, relationship or family breakdowns, or health issues. People who what I've been seeing is people who end up in that category end up being homeless for a lot longer, and so they suddenly stop being transitionally homeless and end up being chronically homeless because the availability of rentals and housing in Palmerston North is just dire at the moment. So back in 2015, when people were talking about homeless shelters at that stage, there was only about 4 or 5 people on the Housing New Zealand waiting list who urgently needed homes. Whereas now we know that there's been well over 600. We know that we've had 100 children in motels and things. So we know that there's definitely a need there of people who are ending up in really difficult situations. And I guess for me, it's about trying to catch them as soon as that happens and make sure that they have a shelter over their heads while we figure out the next steps. In terms of policies and things, in our last report in the planning and strategy meeting, it talked about the national policy statement of urban development. And in that, it was saying that analysis and monitoring undertaken by council to date has identified that Palmerston North has a shortfall in housing capacity over the short, medium and long-term timeframes. And so I'm getting a bit concerned that if we don't step up now, this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And where will we be in another 5 years, in another 10 years? There has been funding available from central government. And unfortunately, we weren't able to apply for that because we didn't have a plan or a feasibility study or even connections with anybody else who had a plan or feasibility study. So I think this feasibility study is the perfect first step to even try and have those discussions with central government or anybody else that might want to partner with us. The best practice housing model, housing first model, has been implemented in a massive list of cities and towns. We should be on that list. Night shelters have been implemented in 6 cities in New Zealand. We should be on that list. And then, it fits with goal 3, priority 3. Yeah, I just think urgency is the key here. We need to get on and see what we can do to help alleviate this. Thank you.
Councillors, there's an increasing number of people in the queue, and I'm aware that we've been going for a couple of hours without a break. Can I have a bit of an indication? Would people like to finish this item before we go for a break? Yes? Is that the general feeling? Okay, well, we'll persist then and take a break once we get this item done. Thank you. Next up is, I presume that's Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, first of all, I'd like to really thank the officers for providing what is a very good report and highlights what is a very important issue for us as a council to grapple with and to determine what role we have going forward in addressing the issue of homelessness. Obviously, it's one of those issues that we're going to need to address alongside other agencies and organisations. But I do think the starting point is the feasibility study that's been outlined. I guess based on previous speakers, really the main question about is how we proceed with this and how it should be funded. And certainly the options have been outlined very well by the officer in the paper, and in particular on table B on page 64, it compares the option 1A and 1B. 1A meaning being the additional budget of 100,000 to get specialist external people to engage in that process, and option 1 being one that doesn't add any additional cost to council. And the consideration that it's got in that right-hand column is that work would be done by existing people who have existing connection to organisation and relationships with those organisations, which I think is a very significant advantage in terms of considering how this work is completed. I won't be supporting the recommendation that's been put up by the chair, and do just want to briefly explain why and speak to what would be a backup recommendation that Councillor Petrenis has indicated that he would support, which is that the council direct the CE to complete a feasibility study using internal resource as outlined in option 1B of the report. My reason that I won't be supporting the recommendation in front of us is that I can see why this is a very tempting way to get on with the work and deliver the work, but I don't think it's a good financial practice, and I don't think it's a good process. I think it could be, set us a precedent that in the coming weeks, elected members could put all sorts of work that are scheduled for next year and say that we should do that with our surplus this year. Councillors, you need to be aware that supporting this does add a cost to the ratepayers and to the council. If we do this year, it will cost an additional 100,000 as opposed to doing it within resources. That 100,000, if it's able to be completed in this year, would have otherwise been an increase in the surplus. Council officers have already cautioned us that it may not need to be able to be completed this year, and then we're dealing with carry forwards for operational programs, which is quite a tricky thing and not a good precedent to get into. I think it's important. I think the comparison in the program, in terms of our timeframes, it's estimating that if we progress the 1B, which is using internal resource, they've estimated that it would be complete within 9 months to 1 year, as opposed to the additional cost where it would be complete within 6 months. So we're only looking at a few months difference here. So I would urge you to consider not to just do what seems a little bit expedient or tempting in terms of using our current surplus, but we need to think about good process and good practice. When we have an annual budget that's consulted on, this work hasn't been a part of the consulted work for this year, but certainly it can be included in the work for next year, and officers have indicated that can be within internal resource. So I think that is the more prudent and pragmatic way forward with this work.
Danielle Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, I'd like to say that homelessness isn't a problem, it's actually a reality, and it's a reality that many whānau share. And as Councillor Dingwall said, it's not just a certain sector of our society who are suffering from homeless now, it's all forms of people within our society. And as an iwi organisation who's heavily involved in the COVID space and seeing the level of welfare that is actually being required, because we actually have members of our community that are actually being abandoned by government in all sorts. So for me, it's a no-brainer not to support the recommendation. For me, it's not about process, it's about an urgency and it's about a need. And if we're socially responsible as a council, then we should just go ahead and do it. I do also support the fact that it is funded and not used from internal resources, as I am aware too that staff are suffering from over fatigue and overloading, their own mental health and well-being. So if we are going to be responsive in the housing space, and I know that the council is doing some great work in the housing space, but this is an area that's drastically needed. And I think, the model that was presented is a good model because it's about wraparounding social and other services. Organisations like the Salvation Army, while they do a great job, they're a Christian-based organisation and they put up barriers. And I have seen those barriers in the food and kai space when we've sent whānau to get kai through them when we've run out. So something like this other one proposed is kind of new, and I think there's an opportunity and there'd be a lot of input from all sectors of the community to be part of this feasibility study going forward. So aware that there's a lot more speakers, so that's what I'd just like to share. Ngā mihi.
The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and kia ora, Danielle. Thanks for your comments and others. Look, I don't disagree with them, and I'm not actually unhappy where this all goes because I think there is a real need. And as the Mayor, I spend 40% of my time, as I've said to you before, in this social space and housing and homelessness actually is part of it. I suppose, look, good report. It highlighted the issues. It also highlighted partners, and that's where I want to go. Is where's the government in this? So we're going to fork out 100 grand. We'll end up forking out probably a couple of million for the actual shelter. I need to understand why we're not partnering from the start with the feasibility study. So I won't be supporting it. But I'm not saying it's not needed. I just want another way that the ratepayer, who we haven't consulted on, yes, we've got a surplus. Do the ratepayers want it spent on a night shelter? I think we should ask them. It's a very, very necessary thing. So I'm not unhappy, and I know where it's going to go. So I'm not unhappy in that space. But I do think there needs to be, why isn't HUD here talking to us on this? I know you need to go through the box ticking exercise. They came and flashed at me in my office of what they're going to do, but actually they should be here doing this work, or at least supporting it. Yes, iwi, churches, other government agencies, other groups that are in this space. There's so many almost climbing over the top of themselves to do this work. But I agree, council should be a partner there, but not the funder and the 100% funder of everything. So, look, very worthwhile. I'm not unhappy which way it goes. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bowen, you're in the queue again. Did you want a second comment?
Sorry, Madam Chair. No, it wasn't a comment. It was a point of clarification. Just elected members might recall that I raised this issue of operational carry forwards in one of our very many meetings over the last few weeks. And the finance team certainly agreed that it's not something that they like to do, but they also agreed that there's no reason why we can't. So that shouldn't necessarily be a barrier to us doing this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of people talked about this crisis that's here now, that's new. Well, I'm afraid it's not a new problem we have in Palmerston North. In 2000, a small group of us, we tried to get the council to do something about a night shelter. The council refused, so we went ahead and we leased the building. And within 2 months, we'd had to lease 3 other properties. And we had 75 people living with us. Not as a night shelter. Most of them, it was their full-time accommodation because no one else would take them on. After 14 years, we handed it over to Legacy Housing. It's now called, and they've taken it over, called Legacy Housing. But homelessness is not new in this city, and it has never been new. It is a problem, and it will always be a problem until housing is addressed at a government level. We can get together and we can start up a night shelter. You're going to have to employ someone to run them, and it won't be one, it'll be 2, because there'll be a male and female one. So they have 2 managers to looking after it. How many rooms are you going to have? 15, 20, 30? Whatever amount of rooms you have is going to be filled. And we talked to the lady from the Housing Advice, and she said, 2 or 3 nights. Well, what's going to happen when somebody gets into a bed and after 2 nights doesn't have anyone to go? Are we going to put them out? Ask Councillor Dingwall about how that feels. I would like the councillors, before we ever go ahead and look at it too seriously, is go and have a look at a couple of shelters. At least go down to Wellington and have a look and see how it's run and what it's done, and see if we as a council want to get involved with it. It's not what you expect. It's not what you think. I think Councillor Dingwall will be the only one that knows what it's like. Go and have a look at them before you think we should have one. I really suggest you do.
Right. sorry, I see Councillor Dingwall, you've got your hand up. Is it some point of clarification?
Yeah, yes, it is. I just want to say, because my name was thrown out there quite a few times in the last minute, that, you know, I would much rather sleep in a homeless shelter for a couple of nights than sleep on the streets, than sleep in a park, than sleep, you know, in the playground slides that I used to. So even if it's for a couple of nights, that's much better than nothing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and I'm just going to be fairly brief on this. I think the presentation given earlier today probably underlined the urgency and the very apparent gap that there is in service delivery for people who are homeless, right? So this is about actually moving people from a state of crisis into transitional and so on, and actually getting them homed on a more permanent basis. The feasibility study will provide a pathway to find a resolution for those people who are in a chronic or critical state of homelessness. It's about creating a foundation, and that will identify the stakeholders and the providers who will be able to build this project to whatever the needs we might find. So I just think that we don't need to get ahead of ourselves. We need to put in the $100,000 and just get the job done so we can actually set a good foundation for it. Thank you.
Thank you. That seems to have exhausted the comments. I'll just have a very brief right of reply. A couple of, first of all, thank you all for your comments, because I thought there were some very good points made in general, so thank you. A couple of members mentioned lack of consultation. So I'd just like to remind us all where this came from, the whole idea. It came from our consultation last year on the 10-year plan. So this is an idea that's come to us from the community. It's not somebody's pet project. It's not something that we dreamt up one day because we didn't think staff were busy enough. This came to us from the community, and the community asked us to look into it. Rather than put a big sum of money in for a feasibility from the word go, we asked for a quick and dirty report, basically, so that we could see whether or not it was worth doing a feasibility. And I think the time for consultation will come when we've got a feasibility study in our hands and we know what we're actually consulting on and what the role of council would be. So I just wanted to comment about that. Councillor Finlay made some comments about our experience of night shelters. I wouldn't expect you to know this, Councillor Finlay, but when I was living in the UK, I was a volunteer in a night shelter, and I used to sleep over in the night shelter at night to provide, a sort of responsible person in the shelter if there were any emergencies, and provide breakfast in the morning. So I'm not sure that there would be too much difference between a night shelter in the UK and one in New Zealand, but I certainly have got personal experience as a volunteer in one. And just finally, just remind you that this is about a feasibility study. It's not about finding millions of dollars for a night shelter. This is about us exploring what our role might be, what partners we might have, where money might come from. And I think there is some urgency to get this done and to at least show that we're seriously addressing all aspects of homelessness and the housing crisis in our city. We have become, and I think it's no exaggeration to say, a leading council in terms of the housing space. We're building social housing. We've partnered with a community housing partner. We've developed affordable sections for sale. We're looking at, as much as we possibly can, assisting at all levels of the housing continuum, and this would be yet another thing to do. So I do urge you to support it, and let's make the decision about where we go from here once we've got more information. Okay, so with that, we'll call for the vote. So I think I might call for a division on this one, Sarah, please, if that's okay.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Rosa, can you bring up the recommendation, please? Okay. Councillor Harpeter.
Against.
Councillor Beatty.
For.
Councillor Barrett.
For.
Councillor Hancock.
For.
Councillor Butt.
For.
Councillor Bowen. Councillor Bowen.
For.
Councillor Johnson.
For.
Councillor Meehan.
For.
Councillor Petrinas.
Against.
Deputy Mayor Rutherford.
For.
Councillor Finlay.
For.
Mayor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Dennison.
For.
Councillor McCullard.
For.
Councillor Dingwall.
For.
Councillor Naylor.
Against.
And Miss Harris.
For.
Okay. That's 15 for.
No, I
sorry,
think it's 13,
isn't
isn't it?
14. Hold on. 1, 2, 3. Sorry. 14 for.
So it's 13
12.
for and 4 against, I believe.
I got 3 against.
I think it was Councillor Harpeter, Councillor Petrinas, Mayor Smith and Councillor Naylor against.
God,
That was my count as well, Madam Chair.
Councillor Petrinas.
Against.
Okay. It's carried anyway.
Okay, thank you. So it's carried 13 votes for and 4 against.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for continuing on. We'll take a 15-minute break and we will come back at 3:35. Thank you. Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just. You can start now, Lorna.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to the Community Development Committee meeting. And our next item is item 9. So that's the Welcoming Communities Programme Annual Report presented by Stephanie Velvin, Community Development Manager. Steph, are you online there? Oh, yes, I see you.
Kia ora koutou. I am here. I'm just going to share my screen with a brief presentation. One moment. This one, then this one. Can everyone see that first slide?
Yes, I can. I think everyone else can. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So this is the Te Waharoa Ki Ngā Hapori Welcoming Communities Annual Report. So I'm just going to give a brief recap of background and talk a little bit more about some of the challenges and highlights that we've experienced over the last year or so and some of the next steps. So Welcoming Communities is an accreditation-based program aimed at creating more inclusive communities. It's Immigration New Zealand led, and it's based on a global network of similar programs. So there are similar programs in Australia and America and Canada as well. As you all know, we were part of the pilot in 2017 to 2019, and now the program is expanding as a fully fledged program to up to 30 additional councils. And there are currently 17 member councils across the country, and that's growing, it seems, just about every week. Our planning and implementation locally has been community driven, and that's guided by the Welcoming Communities Advisory Group, which has a number of stakeholders and partners involved, from for-purpose organisations working with migrants, former refugees and international students to other groups who have an interest in one of the 8 outcome areas of the standard. Palmerston North was accredited as an established welcoming community in June of 2020, so that's the second of 4 accreditation levels we've achieved. And last year it was a little bit delayed, but we got the Welcoming Plan 2020 to 2023 endorsed, and that's now being implemented. So just a bit more context, the Welcoming Communities program is underpinned by an outcomes-based framework, and we're working towards outcomes across 8 broad areas, and you can see those 8 listed there. So overall, the outcomes in the standard set out what an ultimate sort of welcoming and inclusive council and community looks like. Yeah, just sort of stress that it's not a settlement support program, even though some of the actions that we might undertake are related to settlement support. There are other groups that do settlement support, and the Welcoming Communities program is about bringing it together and looking at a community development lens of how we as a community can be more inclusive and more intentionally welcoming. We have faced some challenges over the last 12 months or so, and there are 2 key areas which I'll highlight. So one of those is in terms of capacity to deliver the program. So in the Welcoming Communities Coordinator role, we haven't had someone full-time in that position for 16 months, which has meant that we have had less ability to deliver some of the things that we had planned. And then compounding that, we've had COVID and all of the challenges around various restrictions and lockdowns there as well, which I won't go into. obviously well known. Despite that, the foundations of the program that we had set since 2017 were really strong, and we have remained connected as an advisory group, and we have delivered some of the things that we said we were going to deliver through the Welcoming Plan. And I'll just touch on a couple of those as highlights. So one of those, as mentioned in the report, is the welcome video that we created late last year as an alternative to a city welcome session event. So we had tried throughout the year to pick a date and get organised to have a welcoming gathering like we had trialled in previous years, but we just couldn't pull it together in terms of COVID restrictions. So as an alternative, we decided to create a video because we knew that there were still people coming into our community who we would like to be intentionally welcoming for, and make aware that we are an inclusive city, and there are opportunities for them to settle successfully here. So we created a video with a number of local leaders, rangatane, as you can see, that's a screen grab from the video. Mayor Grant featured, and a number of members of the community as well. I think in total we had 6 languages featured throughout the video, and that was really well received by the community, and a number of community organisations such as the Red Cross, MMC, English Language Partners now have that video to use when they're welcoming people into their spaces. The second highlight I'll talk about is the He Kupu Rangatira Proverb Pathway. So that was launched on Race Relations Day last year, and it was a partnership program, partnership project with Rangatane and Massey University, using proverbs that had been collected from our local community. So in total there were 10 languages represented over 12 installations. And that was an excellent effort towards our welcoming public spaces outcome area, which we had set out as a priority for this welcoming plan. Another area which we've had some activity is in cultural celebrations. So there were a few that were able to go ahead in early 2021, which was fantastic. But unfortunately, we were unable to hold the large Diwali celebration, Moon Festival, Lunar New Year, and Festival of Cultures this year, as you'll know, which is really disappointing. But we tried to think a bit creatively about what we could do within the restrictions to make sure that our communities were feeling like they had opportunities to share their culture, and that we could make some efforts towards our outcome areas in terms of culture and identity, and becoming more connected and inclusive. So for Lunar New Year, we actually had to cancel that, I think, 1 week out from when we had planned to go ahead with the event. So the community had prepared all of their performances, and so we decided we could safely gather them one at a time through the Globe Theatre and record their performances, so that they had a chance, particularly the children, to dress up in their costumes and put on the performance that they had prepared, and then we created a video to share with the community around that. For Diwali, that was cancelled like last year. The comms and events parts of council did a fantastic effort in terms of a radio message to make sure that we were still marking the occasion and sharing some of those important messages around inclusivity and understanding of other cultures. And we had some street banners as well for that welcoming public spaces element. So next steps for the program, obviously we are looking to regain momentum in terms of implementation of our welcoming plan activities. So that will involve now recruitment of a welcoming communities community development advisor in the coming months. And we also want to continue to provide leadership regionally and nationally. So that's something that we have been able to maintain over the last year, an example is with this recent batch of councils that have just joined. Last week I gave a presentation around how they could establish a welcoming communities advisory group in their community, and how they might want to go about developing a welcoming plan. Another area that we'd like to focus on is in terms of monitoring and evaluation. So that's something that we have an opportunity to look at, and ultimately we're aiming for an application for the advanced accreditation, so that's the third level of welcoming communities accreditation in late 2023. Thank you. Click to exit. In slideshow. Share. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steph. That was great, and lovely to see some of the pictures of things that have been going on as well. So great. Thank you for that. We've got some questions. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steph. I've just got a couple of questions. In your report, there's a final comment around then 4 of our neighbouring councils have now committed to the programme, and so there could be the opportunity of a regional welcoming communities network. So I just wondered, is there any, outside of, I guess, the capacity to actually formalise a network, is there any more informal engagement across councils who have already signed up to the programme, and also in particular, I guess, those ones that are closer to us?
Yes, so we have a fortnightly Zoom with all of the coordinators around the country, and we also have a Teams base where we share resources. So for example, in terms of reference for an advisory group, I've got one, someone's wanting to develop one, so we share resources through that network, and then regular communications outside of that space as well.
Okay. And in terms of the councils locally who are participating, I guess there's 2 within our kind of key network with Manawatu and Tararua who are not currently participating. Do we give any kind of local encouragement for them to sign up, or does that come from like the official Welcoming Communities program themselves? How does that work if anything happens in that space?
Yeah, informally. So we have a regular community development quarterly meeting, and so we see our counterparts from the region in that space, and have talked about welcoming communities several times there, and have had several conversations informally around that.
Okay. Is there also and I guess there probably is within the network you already have, but how do we find out what initiatives other councils are doing? I know all of the goals are kind of set locally, so it is a local response, but is there an opportunity to hear what others are doing and see if there's opportunity to implement some of those ideas within our community too?
Yeah, there's a website on the Immigration New Zealand page, and they share initiatives that are happening around the country. I often go and check and see what's happening there, and obviously we hear updates in those fortnightly meetings as well.
Cool, thank you. And then just my final question is, how are we evaluating some of the actions that we have completed? I guess, for example, things like reflecting what we're trying to achieve through our comms material, rather than us just thinking we've done that and it looks really nice or it sounds really nice. How are we evaluating that with, I guess, our wider community?
Yeah, so at the moment, the main feedback we get is through the Welcoming Communities Network and other conversations that we have related to implementation of the activities. We also have the resident survey, which asks some relevant questions. So we get data through that annually. And but there is a work on to look at more closely at how we're evaluating the impact of what we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steph, I just had a question. I saw in the report that you'd noted two amounts of external funding that had been granted for supporting two new initiatives. One was the Welcoming Schools pilot and the other one was the prevention of family and sexual violence. Can you just briefly tell us a bit more about both of those? So that's not work that we ourselves are undertaking. Other people are engaged to do that work. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I put those in there as I think it's important to highlight that it's not all the Welcoming Communities Coordinators' effort. So the value of the Welcoming Communities program is in that network and the ability to channel, I guess, from central government into the community and make the most of those opportunities. So the Welcoming Schools pilot is a good example. That's an idea that came up locally through the Global Parents Network. And floated about for a while, and then there was an opportunity to get some funding, so we supported them to shape that project up, and now that's ready to employ a coordinator through the Manawatu Multicultural Council, and that work will be done by them. And then I guess similarly, the Ministry of Justice project, that was something that the community was interested in being a part of. They were not eligible to receive the funding themselves, so they nominated us as an umbrella to receive the funds, and then they implement the work.
Thank you for that. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Steph. Almost the same question as Councillor Johnson has asked about, not about the Welcoming Schools, the other funding. There were, if I'm not wrong, there was a news story about 3-4 days ago that none of that funds have been used in anywhere in New Zealand. So do you know, have the organization who applied through you, have they used any funds or have they initiated any projects? The family violence and the other thing.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that article, but they certainly are underway with the work, and yeah, have been utilising the funds.
All right, good to know.
Yeah, that. It was delayed due to COVID though, sort of late last year.
I think that's it for questions, Steph. So thank you very much for your report and for all the work that you've done in welcoming communities, and hopefully you can find a good person to hand the baton on to. Councillors, I'm happy to move the recommendation that we accept the report received for information, and seconded Councillor Butt. Thank you. And I'll open up if there's any comment. So I'll just make a short comment, which is that I think that the welcoming communities work has been going on quietly, sort of under the radar, and it's testament to the strength of the programme, I think, and the input from staff in the early days that it's managed to carry through the last 16 months with only part-time staff input. But we should be very proud that we are a leader in this space, that our staff are called on as a resource for other cities, and that we are you know, being able to pilot initiatives here that, like the Welcoming Schools Coordinator, that if they're successful can be used elsewhere. So I think it's a very successful programme, and I'm very pleased with all the progress that's been made. Danielle, you wanted to comment?
Kia ora, Madam Chair. I'd just like to endorse your comments. As the treaty partner to the city, it's been a pleasure to work with the team to really showcase our city as partners, welcoming our new members of the community. So I just want to congratulate all the work that's gone on in the council in this space. Ngā mihi.
Thank you, Danielle. Yes, thank you, and thank you for your partnership in that as well. Okay, it doesn't look as though anybody else would like a comment. So in that case, we will move to vote. We'll do on show of hands. All those in favour? Okay. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, that is carried. Thank you. And that takes us to item 10, which is the committee work schedule on page 75. I'll just hand over to the Chief Customer Officer in case there's any comment that he wishes to make.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the only comment I would like to make is really in relation to some of the things that aren't on here that some members may have expected, and that is potentially presentations by the new reference groups. So look, they aren't on there at the moment, and in the terms of reference for each of those groups, it does make a option for reporting back, but doesn't make it mandatory. So Steph and I have had a chat about this, and we think the best thing to do is to wait until those groups are established, and then we can work with each one and see if they want to make an update to council, then we can add them in. And the way that we thought we would do it is if assuming everyone wants to make a presentation, is do a sort of rolling set of presentations, so they don't all come on one meeting, but they might come sequentially through the year, probably after the presentation in September. And by that time, the two new reference groups hopefully are up and running and have got something to present.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, well, I'm happy to move that we accept the work schedule. Seconded Councillor Bowen. Is there any comment? Okay, we'll move to vote then. All those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstention? Okay, that is carried. Thank you. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Nō reira, ina mana, ina reo, na mihi nui kia koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you all very much. I'll now hand over to the Chair of Planning and Strategy to determine what we do about that adjourned meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We are going to resume planning and strategy, but we do just need 15 minutes because we've got to swap meetings over, and we've got staff who need to swap over in the chamber as well. So if everybody could go back and find the planning and strategy link, join that Teams call, and we will resume planning and strategy at 4:15. Thank you.